7 silent habits that are destroying your soul. Every night. Jesus warned. Jesus warned about the hidden habits destroying your soul at night. There are battles that happen during the day, but the most dangerous ones begin when everything becomes quiet. When the lights go off, when nobody is watching, when your mind finally stops running from itself, something deeper starts happening inside your soul. Most people think spiritual destruction happens suddenly. They imagine one big mistake, one catastrophic decision, one moment that changes everything. But Jesus warned that the heart is usually destroyed slowly, quietly, repeatedly, through habits that seem harmless at first. Every night, millions of people fall asleep carrying fear they never surrendered to God, anger they never released, thoughts they secretly feed in silence, distractions that slowly numb their spirit. And little by little, their connection with God becomes weaker without them even noticing it. That heaviness you feel at night may not just be emotional exhaustion. That emptiness inside your chest may not just be stress. That constant mental noise before sleeping may not be normal anymore. Because some habits do more than affect your emotions. They affect your soul. Jesus understood something that most people ignore today. What you repeatedly allow into your heart during the night eventually shapes the condition of your spirit. And the enemy knows that nighttime is when people are most vulnerable. Your mind is tired. Your emotions are exposed. Your defenses are lower. That is why so many silent spiritual attacks happen after dark. Some people scroll endlessly to escape their thoughts. Some replay old wounds until anxiety consumes them. Others sleep carrying bitterness, guilt, lust, fear, jealousy, or hidden resentment. And over time, those silent patterns begin suffocating the peace God wanted them to have. But tonight, something is different. Tonight, you are going to recognize what has been quietly destroying your spirit. You are going to see the habits Jesus warned about, but most people continue ignoring. And one of these habits may already be stealing your peace every single night without you realizing it. Because the first habit is far more dangerous than most people could ever imagine. The night your soul started drifting away from God. Most people cannot identify the exact moment their soul started becoming distant from God. It was not one dramatic event. It was not one night of complete rebellion. It happened slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The distance began the moment you started ending your nights completely disconnected from God, while believing everything was still fine inside you. At first it seemed harmless. You told yourself you were just tired, too exhausted to pray, too mentally drained to open the Bible, too overwhelmed to sit in silence with God for even a few minutes before sleeping. So instead, you filled your nights with noise, endless videos, constant scrolling, random distractions to keep your mind occupied until your body collapsed from exhaustion. But your soul noticed something your mind ignored. You stopped giving God the final voice of your day. And little by little, other voices became louder. Fear became louder. Anxiety became louder. Negative thoughts became louder. Temptation became louder. That is why so many people feel spiritually weak at night. Their spirit is starving while their mind is overloaded. They consume content for hours but spend almost no time feeding their soul. And eventually, the heart begins feeling empty in ways entertainment can never heal. Jesus often separated himself during quiet moments to reconnect with the Father, because he understood that silence reveals the true condition of the soul. But today, many people are terrified of silence, because silence forces them to confront the pain, confusion, fear, and spiritual exhaustion they spend all day trying to escape. And the enemy loves distracted souls, because distracted souls stop discerning what is happening inside them. You may think your problem is emotional burnout, but sometimes the deeper issue is spiritual neglect repeated night after night. The more disconnected your nights become from God, the heavier your soul begins to feel without explanation. And what happens next becomes even more dangerous, because the second habit quietly opens the door for anxiety to take control of your mind while you sleep. The silent habit that feeds anxiety before you sleep. One of the most dangerous habits destroying people at night is something almost everyone considers normal: going to sleep while feeding your mind with fear. Most people do not realize how vulnerable the human spirit becomes before sleep. Your mind is tired, your emotions are exposed, Your heart is no longer protected by the distractions of the day, and whatever you repeatedly consume during those final moments before sleeping begins settling deep inside your soul. That is why so many people fall asleep physically exhausted but spiritually restless. They spend the final hour of the night drowning in bad news, toxic content, emotional chaos, comparison, fear, arguments, and silent overthinking. Then they wonder why anxiety follows them into bed like a shadow that never leaves. Jesus warned repeatedly about guarding the heart, because whatever enters the heart eventually shapes the condition of the entire person. But most people allow darkness into their minds every night without resistance. Fearful thoughts become mental habits. Negative imagination becomes emotional poison. And slowly, anxiety stops being a temporary emotion and becomes a prison inside the soul. Some people replay painful conversations for hours before sleeping. Others relive betrayal, rejection, guilt, or regret until their chest feels heavy. Some secretly fear the future so much that their mind never truly rests anymore, and while their body lies in bed, their spirit remains trapped in silent warfare. The enemy does not always attack through obvious destruction. Sometimes he simply keeps your mind emotionally exhausted long enough to disconnect you from peace. That constant inner tension you feel at night is not something you should ignore, because when fear becomes your final meditation before sleep, it slowly replaces the trust God wanted living inside your heart. This is why so many people wake up already tired, not because sleep failed them, but because anxiety kept fighting inside them all night long. And there is another hidden habit that makes this spiritual exhaustion even heavier. A habit many people repeat every single night without realizing they are poisoning their own soul from the inside. Why Jesus warned about the thoughts you feed in darkness. Not every battle comes from the outside. Some of the most dangerous battles are the ones happening silently inside your own mind when nobody else can see them. Jesus understood that thoughts are never harmless for long. What you repeatedly think about eventually begins shaping your emotions, your decisions, your desires, and the condition of your soul. That is why darkness becomes so dangerous at night, because nighttime removes distractions and exposes whatever has been growing inside your heart in secret. Many people look calm on the outside while their mind is collapsing internally every single night. They smile during the day. They function normally around others. But when they are finally alone, their thoughts become unbearable. Overthinking becomes constant. Fear becomes louder. Temptation becomes stronger. Memories become heavier. And little by little, the mind turns into a battlefield that never rests. Some people secretly feed thoughts of revenge. Others feed lust. Others replay painful failures until shame consumes their identity. Some imagine worst-case scenarios every night until fear becomes stronger than faith itself. And the terrifying part is that many people do this for years without realizing how deeply it damages the soul. Because whatever you feed grows. If you feed fear, fear grows. If you feed bitterness, bitterness grows. If you feed impurity, darkness grows. But if you feed your spirit with the presence of God, peace begins growing inside you again. The problem is that most people no longer notice what they are allowing into their mind before sleep. Their thoughts run without discipline. Their emotions control them completely. And eventually they become mentally exhausted people trying to fight spiritual battles with an empty soul. That is exactly why Jesus constantly called people to renew the mind and guard the heart. Because the enemy often plants destruction through repeated thoughts long before visible collapse ever happens. And tonight, there may already be thoughts living inside you that are slowly draining your peace without you noticing. But the next habit is even more dangerous, because some people go to sleep carrying emotional wounds that silently give darkness permission to remain inside their heart. The spiritual danger of sleeping with bitterness in your heart. Some people think bitterness is just an emotion. Jesus saw it as something far more dangerous, because bitterness does not stay small inside the heart. It spreads silently, slowly, deeply, until it begins poisoning your peace, your faith, your relationships, and even your ability to feel close to God. And nighttime is when bitterness becomes most powerful. During the day, distractions keep the pain hidden. Work, Conversations, responsibilities, and noise help people avoid what is really happening inside them. But at night, the silence forces the heart to confront everything it tried to escape. The betrayal, the disrespect, the abandonment, the words that wounded you, the people who hurt you and kept moving forward as if your pain never mattered. And suddenly, your mind begins replaying everything again. Over and over. Some people fall asleep angry every night. Others secretly carry resentment toward family members, former relationships, friends, or even themselves. And without realizing it, they allow those wounds to become permanent residents inside their soul. But bitterness changes people spiritually. It hardens the heart. It steals compassion. It kills peace slowly. And eventually it creates emotional exhaustion so deep that even prayer starts feeling distant. That is why so many people feel spiritually numb. Their soul is carrying pain God never asked them to carry alone. Jesus never said your wounds were imaginary. He never said your pain was insignificant. But he warned that holding bitterness inside the heart eventually destroys the person carrying it, because resentment keeps your spirit emotionally chained to the very thing that hurt you. And the enemy knows this. He knows that if he cannot destroy you immediately, he can slowly exhaust your soul through unresolved pain repeated every night in silence. Some people are not being destroyed by external attacks anymore. They are being destroyed by the anger they keep feeding internally. And the terrifying part is that many do not realize how far their heart has drifted from peace until they feel completely empty inside. But another silent habit is making this emptiness even worse. A habit so common today that millions of people repeat it every night without realizing it is weakening their connection with God little by little. The nighttime distraction. Quietly weakening your faith. One of the greatest spiritual dangers today does not look dangerous at all. It looks normal, comfortable, entertaining. And that is exactly why so many souls never realize what it is doing to them. Every night, countless people fill their final moments before sleep with endless distraction. Their hands keep scrolling. Their eyes stay fixed on screens. Their mind jumps from one piece of content to another without rest. Hours disappear while the soul becomes quieter and weaker inside. And the frightening part is that many people no longer know how to be still in the presence of God. Silence feels uncomfortable now. Stillness feels unbearable. The moment the room becomes quiet, people immediately search for noise to escape themselves. But constant distraction slowly disconnects the heart from spiritual sensitivity. Because God often speaks in moments of stillness that distracted minds can no longer recognize. Many people keep asking why they feel spiritually empty, while spending every night mentally drowning in endless consumption that leaves their soul starving. They consume information all night but never feed their spirit. They entertain the mind constantly while neglecting the condition of the heart completely. And over time, something dangerous begins happening. Prayer becomes weaker, discernment becomes blurry, conviction becomes quieter. The desire for God slowly fades, not because God abandoned them, but because distraction slowly became their true nightly refuge. The enemy understands something many people ignore. A constantly distracted soul becomes spiritually numb. When your attention is endlessly divided, your spirit loses the ability to recognize what is slowly damaging you from within. That is why so many people feel emotionally exhausted without understanding why. Their mind never rests. Their heart never processes pain properly. Their spirit never reconnects deeply with God anymore. Jesus often withdrew from noise, crowds, and distractions because he understood the power of spiritual stillness. But modern life trains people to fear silence. And when silence disappears, self-awareness disappears with it. Some people are no longer running toward peace. They are running from emptiness. And every night, distraction helps them avoid confronting the true condition of their soul. But the next habit may be the most heartbreaking of all, because many people end their days without realizing their soul has been quietly crying out for God for a very long time. The emptiness growing inside you, when your days end without God. There is a type of emptiness that sleep cannot fix, a heaviness that entertainment cannot silence, a loneliness that people around you cannot heal. And many do not realize that this emptiness grows strongest at night, because nighttime exposes what the soul has been missing all along. Some people spend the entire day functioning normally. They work, they talk, they laugh. They stay busy enough to avoid thinking too deeply about their inner condition. But when the night finally arrives and everything slows down, they suddenly feel it again. That strange ache inside the chest, that unexplained sadness, that emotional exhaustion that words cannot fully describe. It feels like something is missing, because something is. The human soul was never created to survive disconnected from God, and when a person repeatedly ends their days without His presence, an invisible emptiness slowly begins taking over from the inside. At first it feels small, easy to ignore, but over time it grows deeper and heavier until the person starts feeling spiritually lost without understanding why. Many people try to fill this emptiness with distractions, relationships, success, validation, noise, or temporary pleasures. But nothing fully satisfies the soul when its deepest hunger is spiritual. That is why some people feel empty even after achieving what they once thought would make them happy. Because the soul does not only need stimulation, it needs connection with God. Jesus warned that people can gain the entire world and still lose what matters most internally. And today, countless people are spiritually starving while trying to convince themselves they are emotionally fine. The frightening part is that spiritual emptiness rarely announces itself loudly. It grows quietly, night after night, habit after habit. Prayer becomes less frequent. Conviction becomes weaker. The heart becomes colder, and eventually a person starts feeling distant from God without remembering how they drifted so far away. But sometimes the emptiness you feel is not proof that God abandoned you. Sometimes it is proof that your soul is desperately trying to find its way back to Him. And what happens next determines whether that emptiness becomes restoration or complete spiritual exhaustion. How small secret sins become spiritual prisons. Most people do not fall into spiritual darkness overnight. It happens gradually, one compromise at a time, one hidden habit at a time, one secret sin repeated so often that it eventually stops feeling dangerous. That is how spiritual prisons are built. Quietly, privately, repeatedly. Some people carry sins nobody around them knows about, thoughts they entertain in silence, addictions they hide carefully, behaviors they justify because everyone else does it. And every night they return to those same patterns while convincing themselves they still have control. But secret sins never stay small. What you repeatedly hide eventually begins controlling you from the inside. At first, the conviction feels strong. Your heart still reacts. Your spirit still feels uncomfortable. But when a person ignores conviction long enough, something terrifying begins happening. The heart slowly becomes numb. Prayer starts feeling empty. Worship feels distant. Peace disappears. And little by little, the soul loses sensitivity to the presence of God. That is why Jesus warned so strongly about what people practice in secret. Because darkness grows best in hidden places. The enemy does not need immediate destruction if he can slowly trap a person inside cycles. They feel too ashamed to confess and too weak to escape. Some people are exhausted today not only because of emotional pain, but because their soul is carrying the weight of hidden spiritual chains. Chains of lust, chains of resentment, chains of deception, chains of pride, chains of silent compromise repeated every night behind closed doors. And the frightening part is that many people continue feeding the very habits that are destroying their peace while praying for freedom at the same time. But Jesus never exposed hidden darkness to condemn people. He exposed it to free them. Because what stays hidden keeps growing. And what keeps growing eventually becomes a prison strong enough to control your thoughts, your emotions, and your entire spiritual life. Still, there is something even more dangerous than hidden sin. It is the invisible spiritual attack that begins when a soul becomes emotionally and spiritually exhausted for too long. The invisible attack that happens when your mind becomes spiritually exhausted. Spiritual exhaustion is one of the enemy's favorite weapons, because exhausted people stop fighting. They stop praying with intensity. They stop guarding their thoughts carefully. They stop resisting temptation consistently. And eventually they begin accepting emotional darkness as if it were normal life. Many people do not realize how dangerous prolonged exhaustion can become for the soul. When the mind stays overwhelmed for too long, fear grows faster. Discouragement becomes heavier. Hope weakens quietly. And little by little, the person loses the strength to recognize what is happening spiritually around them. That is why nighttime attacks feel stronger for emotionally drained people. The enemy knows your thoughts become more vulnerable when your heart is tired. He knows loneliness feels heavier after dark. He knows anxiety becomes louder in silence. He knows exhausted minds struggle to hold on to peace. And for some people, every night has slowly become an invisible spiritual war they no longer know how to explain. Negative thoughts multiply without warning. Fear suddenly feels overwhelming. Old temptations return stronger. Hopelessness whispers that nothing will ever change. And the frightening part is that many people blame themselves completely without realizing they are carrying deep spiritual exhaustion inside. Some have been strong for too long. Some have been silently suffering for too long. Some have spent months pretending they are okay while their soul slowly collapses underneath the pressure. And eventually, exhaustion creates dangerous spiritual vulnerability, because tired souls become easier to deceive. A weary mind struggles to hear God clearly. A drained heart becomes vulnerable to lies, fear, and emotional darkness. That is why Jesus constantly invited exhausted people to come closer to him, instead of carrying everything alone. He understood something many people forget today. The human soul was never designed to survive disconnected from divine peace. Some people are trying to fight spiritual battles using only mental strength. But inner peace cannot survive long without spiritual renewal. And if this exhaustion continues unchecked, something heartbreaking eventually begins happening inside the soul. The heart slowly starts crying for help in ways the person can no longer ignore. The moment your soul begins crying out for help in silence, there comes a moment when the soul can no longer hide its pain, even if your mouth says nothing, even if nobody around you notices, even if you keep pretending you are strong. Inside, something begins breaking quietly. Some people reach this point after years of emotional exhaustion, others after months of silent spiritual distance, but eventually, the soul starts revealing what the heart has been carrying for far too long. You wake up tired no matter how much you sleep. You feel emotionally empty around people. Things that once brought joy no longer move your heart the same way. Prayer feels difficult. Peace feels distant. And deep inside, there is a silent ache you cannot fully explain anymore. This is the moment many people become afraid, because they start realizing the problem is deeper than stress, deeper than exhaustion, deeper than temporary sadness. The soul itself is crying for help. And the terrifying part is that many people ignore these signs for too long. They keep distracting themselves, keep suppressing emotions, keep pretending everything is normal while their spirit slowly collapses under invisible weight. But the soul was never meant to survive separated from God's presence. That emptiness inside you is not weakness. That deep longing inside your chest is not random. Sometimes your soul is desperately trying to lead you back to the only place where true peace exists. Back to God, back to surrender, back to spiritual healing. Because the more a person ignores the condition of their soul, the heavier life begins to feel. Anxiety grows louder, fear becomes constant, hope fades slowly, and eventually, even small problems begin feeling impossible to carry. Some people listening right now have not truly rested emotionally in years, not because their body cannot sleep, but because their soul has been silently screaming for restoration. And tonight may be the first moment you finally recognize what has been happening inside you all along. But this is not where the story ends, because Jesus never revealed hidden wounds without also offering healing. And what he wants to do next may completely change the direction of your soul before it is too late. Jesus can still restore your peace before it is too late. No matter how far your soul feels from peace tonight, Jesus has not abandoned you. Even if your faith feels weak, even if your heart feels exhausted, even if you have repeated the same destructive habits night after night for years. He still sees you. He still understands the silent battles happening inside your mind. And he still wants to restore what exhaustion, fear, anxiety, distraction, bitterness, and hidden pain have been stealing from your soul. Many people believe they are too broken spiritually to return to God fully. They think they waited too long, failed too many times, drifted too far away. But Jesus never turned away exhausted souls that sincerely came back to him. Never. Throughout Scripture, he constantly moved toward weary people, toward anxious people, toward emotionally crushed people, toward hearts carrying invisible pain nobody else understood, because Jesus knows how heavy life becomes when the soul is disconnected from peace. He knows the nights you cried silently, the thoughts you never told anyone, the emotional battles you hide behind your smile, the exhaustion you carry while pretending to be fine. And tonight he may be exposing these hidden habits not to shame you, but to rescue you before spiritual darkness grows even deeper. Your soul does not need more distraction. It does not need more noise. It does not need another temporary escape. It needs restoration, real peace. The kind of peace that reaches places anxiety could never heal. But restoration begins with honesty. Honesty about what has been destroying you internally. Honesty about the habits weakening your spirit. Honesty about the pain you keep carrying alone. Because healing starts the moment darkness stops hiding inside you. And maybe tonight is not just another normal night in your life. Maybe this is the night your soul finally stops running. The night you stop feeding fear. The night you stop sleeping with bitterness. The night you finally return your exhausted heart completely to God. Because Jesus warned about the habits destroying your soul for one reason, so your soul could still be saved before it is too late. If this message spoke directly to your heart, write "Jesus, restore my soul" in the comments.